The 325i. Dad bought it because, well, the turbos were a bit unreliable back then. 325, official sponsor of, I guess I could have bought a 330, but I mean it's the same engine, right? The generation of every adolescent BMW fanboy's wet dream. Yeah, my weed dealer, he drives one of those nice 2006 BMWs. The, whoa, this thing really pulls, of any kid who's never actually been in a real sports car. Don't be that way, fall apart twice a day. I just wish that you'd have a dipstick. The E90 325i released in 2006, and it was the first year of restyling since the E46 models. BMW made this look more executive, more curves, features, sensors, more things to go wrong, essentially. Some even go as far as say the car looks kind of feminine. The 325i is rear-wheel drive and came with a straight-six engine making a whopping 215 horsepower at 6,250 RPM and 185 foot-pounds at 2,750. Now, to be fair, the car is over 10 years old, so the power band is actually not that bad, and obviously there's modifications you can do to make it last a little longer or a little more consistent, but there definitely is not enough horsepower in this thing. It doesn't take off. There's nothing you can do about it. It's basically as fast as a Nissan Altima. The 325 actually features the same engine as the 330i, but, and this is a big but, BMW went as far as detuning the exact same N52 engine because leave it to BMW to pull some shady business tactics like that. Mind you though, the 330 actually has a different intake system, and you can actually take that 330 intake system, which is the same as the ones on some SUVs that use a two-stage instead of a single stage, and that can be thrown into the 325i for huge performance boosts. What is pretty exciting though is the prospect that with a tune and some mods, theoretically, and I mean very theoretically, the car could make just over 300 horsepower, which would be really cool to see. And it'd be really cool to see how fast you could get one of these things going before forced induction, because every racer likes to throw a supercharger in their BMW. This one came equipped with a sports package, which actually makes a noticeable difference between stock and one with sports package. The steering is really, and I mean really heavy. Good luck executing a 3-point turn after arm day, and by God, the performance short shifter that this car has from BMW is tight as hell, and it makes the shifts great, but again, good luck getting into reverse, because you need to be Arnold Schwarzenegger or someone of his stature to actually drive this car properly. Now, the sports package does also make the suspension stiffer, and it helps the car corner a bit better, but to be honest, it's quite a kidney buster. Driving all over Toronto, you hit a lot of potholes, and this thing just throws you around. And honestly, this owner told me that he's caught air in certain parts of Toronto going the speed limit just because some of the roads are so bad. The sports package also comes with nice racing seats, or quote-unquote racing seats, but they do feature adjustable bolsters that are inflatable, and they can make for some very snug turns. What's interesting though is how BMW likes to remind you of the things you don't have. There are still buttons for hands-free and Bluetooth modes, which makes me think the ability is there or could be hacked in with one of those apps that E90 fanatics are always raving about. So I guess it might be there, but it's not unless you opted for the package, and maybe it's better than blank switches, but I don't know. The drive on this thing is pretty great. The bolstered seats, suspension, all that stuff makes the car really fun to drive, and honestly it does handle pretty amazingly. This one I'm driving actually has a tune and a couple other mods, including the short shifter, and this one is making, according to an OBD app, 250 horsepower and 250 foot-pounds. I mean, it actually pulls pretty well, and not a lot of people expect to be outrun by a 325i, so it makes for some interesting situations. The driver's telling me people have actually come up to him and asked what did you do to the car? What is going on? There's no way that's a 325i, that sort of thing, which is pretty fun. You obviously can daily this. I mean, that's what it was made for. But this was back in a time where BMW was very focused on the performance, driver's feel end of things. And people do say this was the last generation before the steering really kind of dulled down and didn't have the same sort of feel that the older cars did. But that's not to say the ride is entirely comfortable all the time. Highway cruises is great. Inner city stuff, not so much. Again, because you're constantly being bumped around, especially here in Toronto. And the owners told me there have been times where he's hit potholes so hard, he's wondered if he's shattered something on the chassis. Overall, though, the extra power on this really hasn't thrown off the weight to power ratio at all, and it can really make for some exciting experiences, especially because the steering is so direct. Recently, I drove a twin-turbo Porsche Panamera, and that thing was terrifying. It has like a 0 to 60 time of 3 seconds. And I mean, wow, that thing was insane. But interestingly enough, while the car does literally blow everything else about this BMW out of the water, the steering did actually feel a little bit dead. It handled great, but there's just something about the steering that wasn't all there that you really feel in the E90 generation at least.